Hi, Sam.
Yo, this is fun.
I first want to show you something. So, do you see my goldfinch?
No way. Oh, that's so cool. And it's in one of my most favorite things in the world, which is a snow globe. I've got like five of them. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with them. Yeah.
So, for our friends watching this video who can see your last name, Sam Goldfinch, I just wanted
That's
to
me.
share that not only are you one of my favorite people, you're one of my favorite birds.
Oh, cool. Two in one. I love it.
Yeah, so we're going to have a conversation today for our Sober Sisters in St. Louis group. And Sam and I met, well, we originally met on an online intensive, right?
Yeah, we did.
We were
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that first one together. Now, I have to tell you a story. I haven't told you this yet, so I wanted to like blindside you with a
Oh
story.
God, I was going to say, I hope this is I'm half scared and half excited. So we'll find out how it goes.
So, you and I were, like I said, on a Zoom. It was a Zoom intensive. It was an online because you're from. Tell our friends where you're from.
I'm from the United. Well, I'm from the south of the UK basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in Liverpool now.
Hence his beautiful voice and accent. But so anyway, you had talked our leader Sal on this call. You asked questions here and there, and you asked some question. I don't remember what the question was, but I thought it was so great. It was a question that I wanted to ask, but was too scared to ask. And then I sent you an email because Sal accidentally sent an email to all of us. Like I think it was supposed to be confidential, not just to share everybody's emails because we hadn't agreed to have our emails shared.
Yeah.
But he did. He shared everybody's email, and I was really excited because I found your email.
This is who do I contact about
Yeah.
each of this? How could you?
So I sent you an email, and then you didn't respond, and I'm like, oh
Really?
man, he
Oh
probably
shit.
think no, it's totally fine. But for a long time there, I was like, I probably should have never emailed him. I probably breached confidentiality. He probably thinks that like
Did I really not that? Do you know what? That's genuinely really unlike me. Like I'm pretty good with emails. That was well, I can tell you that was not intentional at all. Like
now that I know you, I know that. Like I totally know
yeah.
that. But it was just funny that like I had this like little storyline of you before, and then we got to meet in person, and I was like, oh, I wonder if he's gonna look at me and think there's that girl who like sent that message without permission.
How could you? No, no, honestly, yeah. It's very, just genuinely rare that an email slips through the cracks like that for me. Because
Yeah.
one of the joys for me is connecting with people who reach out, right? Like, and it's nice to be able to do that. So, well, I'm glad that you got over that, whatever that was.
Well, yeah, and the reason why I share this, not to like, make it sound like you don't respond to your emails, but it's just because I had a natural gravitation and like just desire to get to learn more from you. And
Oh,
I always really loved hearing what you had to share online, not even knowing you. But now that I got to meet you in person and we got to have like a quick friendship and I got to meet your partner, like it's really fun to be able to continue our relationship and to
yeah, yeah.
come on and share today with our friends a little bit about your work and especially your work in the space of addiction. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm going to pause there and let you share a little bit about what you do, um, how you do your work, and yeah, just go.
Awesome. I'm also super curious what the email was. Like if I answered the question, whatever it was.
I'll go
What a,
back and try to find it. Who knows? Maybe I got the email address wrong. I could have copied
what
and pasted it incorrectly.
what a mystery. Like that wouldn't that be hilarious? Like if you find out that you got the email wrong, like that isn't that crazy the internal worlds we can create? Like it's funny because oh, how's this for a segue? There's a way in which that's basically the work that I do is, people are walking around in one world, one reality, and that may be something where they are quote unquote addicted to alcohol or in a wonky relationship with something, um, or imbalanced. I know some people like the word addiction, some people don't like the word addiction. Like when it comes down to words, to me, it's an energy, right? It's just kind of we pick up that something's not working for us. So if anyone's in that bracket, I love to work with people to help them just kind of see what's possible and live a beautiful life, be it alcohol free or whatever free.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people it looks like there's only really one option, or like there's barely any options around them, or it's just the traditional methods of kind of getting free. Or I know for me, like when I was going through my own experience with addiction, I didn't feel called to go to AA or 12 steps. Not that there's anything wrong with that world. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, and I think a lot of people they are sort of, and I get it, they're kind of doing everything they can to avoid a lot of the stigma and all this kind of stuff, and meanwhile they're kind of slipping into more problematic drinking or whatever it might be for them. So yeah, I just want people to be able to live their best life. It's not my fight. Like I'm not. I know it's just not my way of relating to this, that I'm trying to like rid the world of, the terrors of alcohol or all this. I like I don't want people to even hate alcohol. I want people to, because to me, if you hate something, it means you really care about it. I want it to be so like not a thing for people that it doesn't even make sense to hate it. They're like, whatever. They may go through a period where they just kind of push it away, or they're like, can't believe I've been sold this big lie about booze. I thought it did all these things for me. That's all fair and square, but basically to arrive in a place where someone feels completely free and it's just they just don't drink anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's at the heart of all that work that I do. um and I do it through podcasting, I do it through coaching, I do it through writing, and then, as you know, I also do a lot of work under. So I have a something I run with a couple of friends called Present and Sober, which is about living a present life. And we use the word sober, but it's mostly about booze. Basically, we're talking about alcohol.
Yeah.
um and then I have other stuff I do around kind of, spiritual stuff, but that's very often for people who are kind of, maybe they like stop drinking or whatever, and then they think, oh, there's so many other things I want to explore, or I've realized that I was drinking to help me kind of avoid these feelings or whatever.
Hmm.
And they just want to go a bit deeper, I suppose. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
a start.
Yeah. And you have a lot of, you've told me too, a lot of your clients are in the US, right?
Yeah, I'd say about, just for whatever reason, circumstances and how life's unfolded and all that kind of stuff, about, well, probably 80 odd percent of the listeners of from the for the podcast, and also the people that I work with, are across the pond, your neck of the woods in North America, be it the US or Canada, or yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, you're doing this work, and I would love, as much as you, I mean, I know you're a very open book. You've said that,
Yeah.
but maybe you just to kind of orient us to your own like your own journey with addiction and how
Sure.
that unfolded for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything I haven't shared at this point. It's funny because when I first started telling my story, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever share that. And then it kind of getting a bit kind of exciting to share it, because people kept reaching out and being like, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you spoke that. I
Yes.
can remember my dad being like, or whatever you do, lad, don't mention these. You're just going to ruin your life. And every time I've gone a bit kind of got
Uh,
a bit more open and a bit
yeah,
more vulnerable, it's been
yeah,
because I
yeah.
think people are afraid to do that. So, in a way, I kind of want to lead the way on that. So that said,
Yes.
um, I'd say drinking, like, so at the age of 12, probably I started drinking. Like in the UK, it's pretty normal for kind of kids and teenagers to get their hands on alcohol in a
Hmm.
culture where, it's kind of sort of sold as the elixir of life for a lot of people. Like you kind of pick that stuff up, even if it's not necessarily all conscious. You just kind of, you see adults drinking, it's around everywhere. And so, yeah, we were sneaking out and drinking and quite young. And I was really lucky. I grew up in a household with a lot of support and structure, and a mum and dad who loved me to pieces. Who, no one's upbringing is perfect, is it? But it was a really lovely family home. And for whatever reason, from a very young age, I was struggling with, well, now undiagnosed ADHD, OCD, a lot of just kind of like, I felt like quite anxious and quite, I don't know, like I didn't understand the world. I felt like there was something wrong. Like it's about the only way I can put it is, it just felt like something's not right. I feel like I'm on the outside of an inside joke or something like that. And so alcohol quite early just kind of found its way to me when I drank it. Even when I was that age, it was like, oh, it just gave me a minute to just kind of be a teenager. Um, and so it's funny. So it didn't kind of like become a full-time gig or anything until I left home. And then basically the moment I did leave home to go to university, it pretty much did. I think from the age of 18 onwards, what had been a weekend thing, or kind of like sneak into town with fake IDs and having a lot of fun. It was a lot of silliness and a lot of fun, and probably a lot of situations that probably I'm sure my parents would be like, oh my god, I can't believe you were up to that or whatever. But yeah, when I got to university, I think marijuana and alcohol just kind of became my support system. I was using them all, like, yeah, pretty much all day, every day, like, or at least drinking in the evenings. I was going to uni though. I handed in I did the bare minimum and got by. And luckily, I'm not the most book smart person, but I'm quite good at being able to kind of uh, do things last minute. So I kind of just about got away with that. Went to work, was worked through, and and yeah, I just kind of held stuff together. So it was never like, I just didn't even question it, you know. I just didn't occur to me that I might have a problem or any of that kind of stuff. Got into the electronic music scene and the rave scene. Got into taking recreational drugs as well, and a lot of MDMA and this kind of thing, and going out and partying. Which obviously, just under the influence of those substances, you can drink a whole load more. And then it just really, it ramped up quite quickly. I went away traveling when I was about 20. How old was I? 23. I went to Australia, did a couple of years of just traveling around Southeast Asia, Australia, all a drunken blur. Um, and then when I got back, trained to be a teacher because I wanted to keep traveling. So I trained in teaching English as a foreign language and went to Poland. And I think over the course of those 2 years, two things happened. One was my body started to say, yeah, you've been at this for, you've been drinking, even at that age. It was like, you've been drinking a lot, man. Like for the best part of 10 years, you've just been hammering it. Um, and I got a job that I loved. Like I started doing teacher training. So I was when I first got there, I was kind of like a new teacher, and figured out that I was like, I'm quite good at this thing. And then I started getting into teacher training and became the assistant director of the school. And so I suddenly had people relying on me emotionally, professionally. So drinking became more to do with kind of stress and all this kind of stuff. Then I lived on my own. Um, and there was just no reason not to kind of come home and drink each night. And it just really quickly just became something where I was like, yeah, you can't keep doing this, man. The writing was on the wall. As I say, I didn't lose a job. I didn't none of that stuff, but it was consuming my inner world. I'd be thinking about drinking. I remember taking a month off with a friend in Poland, and yeah, I don't know. It wasn't none of this was like me really thinking about it a lot of the time, but it was clear to me that things weren't working out at the time. Because why else would I have needed to take that month away? Um, and then it was funny because I guess the attempt to stop, and I think this is quite common, the sudden realization, oh, I think I need to change things up, and the attempt to stop and the attempt to moderate in a kind of, I guess, a kind of paradoxical way was also why things started spiraling because I realized what I was relying on alcohol for, and
Hmm.
so those things fed into each other.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then I just started having I think I started having periods away from drinking. So I would have a month off or a couple of months off or 3 weeks off, and I was reading a lot around this time. Um, this was like 10 years ago, so it's just I think a few weeks ago it was like a decade for me of not
Yeah.
drinking, which is kind
Awesome.
of it's
So
kind
great.
of cool. It's a
So
long time to
great.
like live your life without something that used to be something that was there all the time. So I've learned a lot about myself the last 10 years and the world.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I'd have periods of and it was kind of one of those where I didn't find it too hard to stop drinking for quite a while, but then when I returned to drinking, it would be even worse.
mm.
And the way I've described it was once I'd started drinking, it was almost like and I don't recommend this as a way of stopping.
Right.
Not this. I'm like not suggesting this as an approach.
Okay,
It
good
was
to know.
almost like the only way I knew how to stop was to make it so bad I didn't have a choice. So I'd start off, then it wouldn't be too bad, slippery slope, and then it would be like, right, I really don't want to be drinking anymore. And then so then it would just increase and increase until it got so bad that it was like, yeah, you've got no choice, man. You need to stop. So I did that a few times. Of course, the danger with that is every time those patterns got worse.
Yeah.
And so by the time I stopped, it was like, it was just heavy. I didn't want to be doing it anymore.
Yeah. Do you remember
But
your
I didn't.
last? Go ahead.
No, no, no. I was going to say I don't, but I didn't fit the usual mold of like what somebody might relate to as someone who's an alcoholic or a serious drinker or something. Well, if you can stop for 2 or 3 months, you don't really have an issue or something,
Right.
right? And it
Right.
wasn't like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it wasn't interfering in life. You still got through school, you were still getting jobs, you were still performing. So no one ever really came to you and was like, "Hey man, I think, this alcohol is getting in your way." It seemed like it was always really
Well, I was very
generated.
good at hiding it, and like it was having a huge impact on me in terms. Like I can remember being on the verge of a panic attack, like just before teaching a lesson. I was like, what's going on? Because consciously I'm like, I'm all right. But at the time I was smoking and vaping a lot. So the combination of that and the alcohol was like, so I was like, what's going on? Why do I was like, oh, you need to leave because you're just about to have a so I went outside, breathed, went into the air, and it was fine. And I went and taught the lesson. But so it was impacting me in all sorts of different ways. Sleep,
Yeah.
all these different but it wasn't, but I was very good at hiding it, very good at rationalizing it, very good at kind of um very afraid of what it would mean if I suddenly was like, oh, sugar, you can't do this anymore, petrified of that. So that was playing out as well. And yeah, I think you were going to ask me about my last drink. It's funny.
Yeah.
So the 10 years, it's more like 12 if you were to tally up all of the time I've been alcohol free. I think it's more like 12, but about 80. So I remember my what I thought was my last drink was actually was in a pub in Poland, and I had just gone to order like a quadruple bourbon or something like that, and I stood there and I looked at it, and it was just one of those moments where you just have an insight, just have a voice. It's like, I'm not doing this again, and I just put it down and walked out. I don't think I said goodbye to anybody. I just walked out, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And that was 18 months that and then I did drink for a few weeks after those 18 months, which I'm happy to talk about because I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
It was a gift that I gave myself, that even though it didn't feel like it at the time, there was a bunch of things going on in my life, um, about dating, going out there into the world and meeting people. I had avoided a bunch of things for those. I'd been traveling the world and having a lot of fun for those 18 months, but I'd also avoided a bunch of stuff. I was like, I don't know how to talk to women without alcohol in my system. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And so suddenly alcohol made sense in a way that it hadn't. And it
Yeah.
was good. It was glad it taught me. It taught me, dude, you need a tribe. You can't just take alcohol from your life and just keep things the same. You need to mix some things up. You need to find out what makes you tick. What are the things it really just, I needed to see that. I had, because there's an alternate universe where that didn't happen and my world is smaller because I'm not doing things that I want to do, still unable to go and meet people. Yeah, all this stuff that I needed to see in a new light. So that was very helpful. But that time I was just about to train to be a teacher back home, sort of like state school teaching. So I was basically going back to uni for the first time in a long time. And I was maybe 3 nights, I think the Friday night before the Monday when I went into placement. So in the UK, you do you go into a couple of schools to do your training. And I went out in Liverpool on the Friday night with one of the lads who was on the course, and we had the kind of night out that I was never into. He wanted to go to like cheap bars and shop bar. It just wasn't my vibe. I was much more like pubs and fancy beers. That was kind of my usually, right.
Sure.
And it was totally it was shit basically. It wasn't a good night out. And and on the way home, I think I bought a packet of cigarettes, I bought a bottle of whiskey, stuck it in the freezer, and I was like, I'm going to feel absolutely dreadful this weekend. And I woke up the next morning and I felt absolutely dreadful. And I remember the thought floating through my head, and it went, it's okay though, because there's a bottle of whiskey in the freezer and you can just drink that and make it all go away. And I just went, oh, I'm not doing this again. And I think, in my mind's eye, I could see what it was going to be like to go through, because it was going to be an intense year, learning new teaching things, me
Sure.
being at school. I was like, do you really want to be doing that, hanging like every day,
Yeah.
and I just in that moment, it was sort of like what moved through me was this feeling of, I don't care what it takes, and I don't care how long it takes me. I'm not drinking again, and I will figure out how to have fun, and I will figure out the things that I love doing. I don't want to stop music festivals. I don't want to stop concerts. I don't want to stop traveling, and I'm not going to rest until I've figured it out.
Yeah.
And that was and it's funny because I think it was about 2 weeks after that. Do oh gosh, Holly Whitaker. I'm sure many of
Oh
your
yeah, yeah, yeah. What is
audience.
she wrote a book, right? On
So she wrote "Quit Like a Woman," right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes.
Well, when I first stopped drinking, this is well before most of the Quit Lit that's out now was out. She
Yep.
had a blog called Hip Sobriety, which I don't think you can read anymore.
Okay.
And there was like a mini group of there was this teetotal tattoo that people were getting as like a mark of and I can remember being absolutely petrified to get that, because even though I was sure, I was like, this is such an an
Mm.
act of accountability. My brother was like, if you ever drink again, you're gonna look like an absolute tit because you've got that on your arm. I was like, yeah, I know.
That's the
And
secret to sobriety, huh?
I'm not suggesting anybody goes and gets tattoos, but it was kind of like I needed to do something radical to just kind of mark it for myself. And so,
Yeah,
I really don't recommend, everyone has to make their own decisions on
yeah,
that. Um, but yeah, and but I haven't looked back since then. So yeah, I'm really glad. It's kind of like those few weeks that I drank were a part of the freedom, because if it weren't for the insights that I had during that drinking, the mini drinking phase, I think I still would have been harboring a bunch of stuff that wasn't helpful, or who
yeah,
knows? Because it's
absolutely.
so
No,
that was a great gift to
no,
give myself.
that's really, I love that you brought that up, and I think it, you brought up AA, and I remember reading in Annie Grace's book, This Naked Mind, who you have trained with,
Mm.
right? You can tell us a
And
little bit.
been one of their like lead coaches for years.
Coaches,
I still
yeah,
do a little bit for them
yeah.
now, but yeah, I've done a
I,
lot of work.
yeah, I remember in her book, I really felt so, it just made a ton of sense to me that like the way that if someone drinks again in AA, they have to like start all over. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you've lost it. And that to me feels like, well, where else in life do we do that to ourselves? Nowhere, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you sharing that experience and also the insights that came from that, because the shame or the self-critical voice that comes in when we have so-called messed it up, is just so unhelpful
Yeah.
in many, many ways. And then for you to be able to share like how many insights came from that opportunity that you had with that period. So I think that's just gives a lot of space and permission for people to feel like if they have and you had a post on this too, the word relapse,
Yeah. Yeah.
that having that like I've messed up in this really big way, to not see it that way, is just really empowering. So I'm grateful you shared that.
No, I think one of the things that we tend to think, you probably a few people listening to this have probably seen that meme where it's like how we think progress is, and it's this straight line, how progress really is, and it's like this squiggly spaghetti thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. We have this idea that, well, freedom looks like XYZ, and it's going to mean that I have this perfect straight line, but it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. And one of the things that we tend to write out of, things going wrong, or if we fail, like I kind of could have easily have seen it like that, and like I felt like an idiot at the time. Like it's okay. Like I was like, I just been telling about it, everybody how great this is for 18 months, and here I am drinking. It's like whatever, we're all human, like things happen.
Yeah.
But those are often the moments, like no mud no lotus, all that kind of stuff. We see it in the middle of a time that's really difficult, and they're very often the times we feel like we're in the darkest of times, when actually that's when the light goes on. It's like that's when we're moving. And there's a post I wrote about how we're never really off track. From one perspective it really looks like we are, but I don't think we can be.
Yeah.
We can't, because if you're when it comes to kind of success and failure, they just look like they're two sides of the same coin. Because if you continually if nothing ever goes wrong, there's not much opportunity for learning. And if everything, and when things do go wrong, if you learn something from it, they're usually the points where our life takes a turn that we didn't expect. Or so to me, I'm just like, I always want to hide it in that light. Like you never really know what whether something's good or bad. You never really know if that is, oh, this is the end. And to me it just is just not true to say that we ever go back to square one. Like, not only is that not helpful, it might be helpful to reset the numbers for some people, in the sense that they're like, okay, I want to like count from day one. I have no opinion about that. Do
Yeah.
what makes sense to you. But the idea that we have like unlearned everything that we've seen, that just looks untrue to me. It doesn't look
Yeah.
like that's how the world works.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. Right. So, the part where you started realizing that you can have fun without alcohol, I want to dig into that a little bit more,
Yeah.
because I think that that can be a big story. That was definitely, it still is part of my story. I still sort of struggle in that space. where alcohol was both of ours. Like it was a way that we did social. I mean,
Hmm.
anytime it was social, there was always some kind of substance there, right? So when you learn that at such an early age, it's hard to envision or know that that is possible
Yeah.
without alcohol. And I do think that now, at least, there's a level of joy that is found that I can access so much more easily that that doesn't require any substance anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And that baseline, I mean that baseline, right, where we think that we need to have a substance to be able to get to a certain point to realize that maybe that is what we needed when we were in that space. But when that gets removed and then we see that joy is possible, being silly is possible, connecting is way more possible in a real way. I have an experience where I was at a book club, and one of the women who I admire was kind of speaking to the cultural impact of how important alcohol is to being able to have bonding experiences from a historical standpoint, with people being able to have conversations that they might not have ever had without alcohol being present or whatever. And I remember kind of listening to that thinking, gosh, that is not my experience. My experience is, though I might have felt that I bonded after a night of partying with people, I don't even really remember what I said truly.
Yeah, that could happen.
Yeah, or that sense of bonding was not really, it's almost false. It was false. Like it almost felt like there was a bonding, but a different level of unconsciousness bonding and not even true. Or worse, shame, like what if I said stuff that I really actually regretted? So I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about any of that, and how you continue to come upon your own learning. Because I think you mentioned something about you and your partner hanging out until like 4 in the morning the other day. And I'm like, what? How does
Yeah,
someone do that without
that's not so
alcohol?
often. That's not so common these days, but it does happen every now and again. I'm in bed by 9:30 kind of guy, so I don't want anyone thinking that I'm like that. That's a common thing.
I know, I know. I just had to say that
Yeah,
that is possible still in an
yeah.
alcohol-free life. And you had fun. You weren't like, someone wasn't dragging you there. You like chose to be there for the most part.
To me, yeah, it's so. I guess it's like I've had a couple of really wonderful teachers. One of them being my partner Robin, and a previous partner, Lisa, they both, neither of them drink a whole lot. Like Rob actually has never really drunk because of like tummy issues and stuff like that. She's never been able to kind of
Yeah.
tolerate it. So, and she dances, she goes out a lot. So it's funny when you hang out with somebody for whom it's never been an option. So they haven't learned to kind of, this is an unfair way of putting it, but hide behind alcohol, which
Yeah.
is, that's a
That's
metaphor I think some people
sure.
resonate with. And I don't want I don't want to say it's like, it's not a judgment. It's not, as I see it, we're all just doing what makes sense given how the world looks. And it made sense for me to drink. It made sense for me. I couldn't, go and socialize if I didn't have a few drinks in me before I went. By
Right.
the end, I would be like, I needed that. That was my crutch or whatever, my superpower. But my like, we talk about Dutch courage and all this kind of stuff. It's, but yeah, like in order to go on that journey of coming to realize that we've been built to socialize and that we're social animals and that socializing is fun in its own right. And that interestingly, one thing that a lot of people don't think about, I think we give alcohol a huge amount of credit that it truly doesn't deserve. And explain what I mean by that. It's like we go out for the night, usually if you don't drink for that first hour and you get through the like, oh, a little bit uncomfortable or whatever, that kind of like, checking, evolutionary checking out everything's okay, start talking to people, you get out your own way, start having fun, you start kind of talking to people, having good conversations, you're not so in your head, you're not really kind of insecure, that you get a real rush, a real buzz from that. Like I get home from nights out having socialized and I kind of need to wind down before I can sleep, and most of that credit gets put on alcohol, because what happens is if we haven't seen that socializing is fun in its own right, we have a huge amount of reference points where we've gone out and we're not allowed to drink, or with a designated driver or whatever, and we don't enjoy it so much because we're used to having booze. So it's kind of like we reverse engineer the logic and we think, well, I can't have fun without it, therefore I need it in order to have fun. But if you actually reflect on your life, if alcohol truly caused a good time, you would have a good time every time you drink. that's not how it works in my experience for most people. There are nights where we argue, nights where we cry. Like, it's not clean fun, alcohol. Whatever it isn't clean fun. There's always a bill to pay. There's always, there's always something, even if it's just sleep's not so good or that argument, whatever it is, there's always something.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I think we just give it just a load of credit it doesn't deserve, and to go through that process of learning to kind of just enjoy yourself without it. It's really powerful. And it just looks to me like it's a human thing that if we're in our head about something, if we're a bit insecure and we're kind of caught up in our thinking or believing in that kind of story in our head, we don't tend to have a good time. The nights where we tend to have a good time, we're having conversations, we're just kind of enjoying connecting with people. And we all have our preferences. I know I like socializing in smaller groups versus bigger groups. That's just me. I'm a bit neurospicy in that way as well. I'd rather hang out with one person or do something like this than hang out with 50, right? It's just how I'm
Yeah.
built. And Rob's totally different. She'll bounce into a room with 100 people in it, no problem, right? And so I think we have to learn these things about ourselves, figure out our preferences, figure out what it is that makes us tick, figure out the socializing that we like. Like, if my friend says to me, hey, it's my 40th birthday, or whatever, I'm going to this place, and I know it's like a horrible, grimy shop bar where the music's just at that like volume where you can't talk to anybody about anything, and you're shouting in each other's ears, and your feet are sticking to the floor. Like, I'm not going to have a good time, but that's not because of me. As I say it, that's because that's not my idea of a good time. But if someone says to me, oh, I don't know, do you want to come to this comedy night, or do you want to do this, or do you want to do that? I'll be like, yeah, let's go. So you have to learn what you actually enjoy as well.
Yeah, totally. And that becomes easier too, right? You just get a little bit more clarity with that, with the sober life, the alcohol-free life, I think.
Yeah, well, you soon figure out when you're not having a good time. And if you reflect on it, you'll usually find that those are the nights where you used to drink loads. If you think that you're like, well, I'm not having a good time, so I'll compensate by drinking lots or whatever. And that's not actually, as far as I can tell, having a good time.
Yeah.
So I would much rather learn the things that I want to do, kind of have open channels of communication with my partner and with my friends around the things that are for me and the things that aren't. Be honest about that. Most people are really forgiving. Yeah, we get really on our head about what people are going to think.
Mm.
But for example, I might say to that person, look, I know it's your birthday. I know it's an important one. I will take you out for breakfast. And like, I'll pay, like, because that's just not my vibe. It really, and there are times in life, and I know we spoke about this, there are times in life where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll swallow this one. It might not be the best night in the world, but in accepting it and realizing that, those feelings of peace and contentment are available if I'm not caught up in a load of crap in my head. I might not be having, the best time in the world, but I won't be having a bad time. It will be
Right,
fine. It will be okay.
right.
And there are things that I have that are kind of boundaries, I guess. Like, for example, Robin, she'll happily go out till whenever in the morning and then wake up early the next day, which I don't do so much. But I'd be like, look, let's go and do this thing, but I'm going to get a taxi home at 10 o'clock and, do what you want. Like, stay till whenever
Right.
and make sure she's safe and all the rest of it and she
Yeah.
gets home okay. But, I'm not going to stay somewhere and torture myself when it's something. So there are compromises. We sometimes think of these things in really black and white terms, but you got to figure out your boundaries, right? I don't want to stay up super, super late and then the next day sucks as well. I don't mind being
Yeah,
like,
that
well,
carryover.
yeah, yeah, right. Like, we all have to make our own decisions around this.
Yeah.
And last thing I'll say, the 4 a.m. stuff. There are DJs. I've always been into electronic music and festivals. Every now and again, there's a bunch of DJs, and I'm like, stuff it. I think it might be worth it. Like, I can tell you, it's getting less and less often that I think it actually is worth it.
Because the next day is worse and worse and worse, right?
The older you get, the more
Yeah,
it takes. It's just
totally,
yeah.
totally. You alluded to this earlier, but that people drink because they're not confident, they're feeling socially anxious, they're in their head, and so the alcohol for many people would kind of give them that liquid courage, right? So they think. And I would love to hear a bit about how that has unfolded with time for you and how that's gotten easier for you, or you found your own, like in different situations. Um,
Yeah.
because I had my coaching call right before this with my coach, and I was sharing with her how I went out with two different groups this week, and one group I went out with, it's just so easy. It's just flows. It's like that natural buzz. I get home, I kind of have to wind down. It was so lovely. And then there's this other group that I sometimes hang out with that I'm in my head so much with, and I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me. And now I will say, typically with this other group, there is usually alcohol always being served and poured, and I'm usually one of the few who am not drinking.
Yeah.
But I was just kind of talking that out with my own coach, and I'm so ready to just be not give a crap at all. I'm just about I wanted to be able to go into any social situation and just be.
Mm.
And so I just this is a yeah, I guess a selfish question, just because I would love to hear, because I know this is tricky. Some people do have social anxiety, or the labels. I don't love the labels, but some
Yeah,
people
me neither.
feel
Me neither.
socially anxious inside when they're in
Yeah.
those group settings, especially if it's not the right size or for whatever reason. So, how did that unfold for you, and maybe any thoughts that you might have to share with me as I still kind of navigate some of that stuff?
Yeah. It's a good question. Such a good question. It's super strange, but it seems like most of the stuff that's helpful when it comes to everything, when it comes to alcohol, it's almost counterintuitive. It's like the stuff that we think we need to work on, or the stuff we think we need to focus on, often isn't the most leveraged stuff. So, for example, people think I've got a, you know, quote, social anxiety problem, right? Well, actually, coming to understand how we work, coming to understand how the human experience works, and what we even mean by that, or what's going on with insecurity. This kind of stuff, like in a more sort of general sense, I think is often more helpful than trying to solve the problem, because then it just kind of can get bigger and bigger, and it seems like this thing. So, so let me think if I can kind of give some examples around that. So, for example, people often think with relationships, I've got this relationship problem, and I need to do this and I need to do that, and my wife or my husband or my partner does this and they do that. Well, often in those cases, the first thing I'd want to be working on is communicating with people and knowing it's safe to have a real, heartfelt, honest conversation with difficult feelings. Because if we don't know we can do that, we'll innocently point the finger out there. And often the first port of call, as far as I'm concerned, is can we have a conscious conversation about this?
Yeah.
And until we've got to the bottom of that, all that other stuff is like clunky and difficult. And so, in the same way, it's kind of like with the socializing piece, something that you had that snow globe earlier, and it's such a wonderful metaphor because for me, one of the things at the heart of everything I teach is helping people to understand how their experience works. That you're always living in the feeling of your own internally generated world. Like, so for example, it looks to you, I'm willing to bet that in the scenario with your two groups of friends, it looks like it's the groups of friends that are like causing the internal stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not for a second, for all I know, there's, and for any specific situation, when you said I just want to be able to go into any situation and just be this or be that, I'm like, I don't know, like sometimes it's real wisdom, maybe. And I'm not saying this is true for you, but like
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, maybe they're not the people that I want to hang out with, or maybe these people are I just feel more comfortable with those people. And I think sometimes there's this intuitive feedback system that just because we're living in our own world doesn't mean that the data and the feedback that we're getting is letting us know about our world. That's valuable. That's super valuable. So I don't want to kind of gaslight myself into situations that I don't want to be in. I'm
Right.
not for a second suggesting that's what's going on for
Yeah.
you, but we want to keep those mechanisms alive. And because
Yeah.
sometimes, I don't know, it's, we just kind of realize, wow, like this relationship is changing, or I don't want to spend so much time with these people, or I want to spend more time with these people, or this relationship suddenly is much more, I feel more connected here. Like, I think that's all really valuable, and things probably are going to change. And that's okay. Like, we might be scared about that, but whether or not it's about alcohol or whatever, life has ebbs and flows and ups and downs, and things change and move. So that's a part of it for sure. And when it comes to the sort of insecurity bit or the anxiety bit, it's funny for me because for nearly 20 years, I felt like I had this huge anxiety problem that I needed to solve. So it became really important. I started getting anxious about my anxiety. And you know, it was in all these loops about it, right? Um, and then I came to realize, right, well, if I'm really caught up, like that snow globe, if it's shaken up, if I'm really caught up in all of the stuff in the snow globe and I go into a social setting, it doesn't matter whether they're my favorite people in the world. I generally won't have a good time. Like if I went up to anybody, universal rule as far as I can see, if I went up to anybody in a social situation who's not having a good time, tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Hey, what's going on for you right now?" They'd go, "Oh man, my head's full of bees. Like Uncle Barry's wearing the same shirt as me. Sally's up to her same old tricks. Like, how the frick do I get out of here?" Like, and if I went up to anybody in a social situation where they're having fun and they're just chilled out, and I said, "How much is going on for you?" They'd probably be like, "Not a whole bunch. I'm just having conversation." And so the most leveraged thing isn't trying to change out there, it's getting a read on what's going on for us. And if we're tired, caught up, you know, those kinds of things, they're not kind of conducive to having a good time. So I want to help people in that arena. I want people
Yeah.
to understand, first and foremost, that the most powerful thing you're ever going to have is an insight into your world, and that's going to help you going into that world. But for as long as it looks like that circumstance has power over how you think and feel, and that it and like I don't know, it just like that just gets in the way. It's like interference.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
kind of often want to have conversations about that rather than kind of going towards the thing it looks like we need to.
Yeah. No, that makes such great sense. I love kind of like the pairing or the dual understanding of our intuition is important and there might still be something there, right? And
Yeah,
that's something to look at or to, lean more with the friends that you just feel like yourself with. Do more with that. That just seems natural and, no work. It's ease. I think
yeah,
there's so much beauty in just ease that just comes naturally without trying. But then that other part makes a ton of sense too. It's like, it's not this group necessarily. It's not this thing. It's that, yes, my mind is so much busier in that group. But I think what I'm starting to see, um, and I guess my next thing is the extension of that. So if we know that that's where we are, we're noticing that, oh, the mind is so busy. There's so much thought going around right now. I'll just kind of see that and then I'll kind of come back and check into my body. But it still feels like I'm in this my own little world, kind of, being with myself, which kind of takes you out of the social environment, a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, like is that sort of the next step that when you're in this space where you notice, wow, yeah, the snow globe is like it's snowy in there right now. There are a lot of thoughts that are chattering and kind of sensing the body and just being there with myself. And sometimes I'll even just like no one will see, but I'll just even kind of take my hand and just kind of give myself some just comfort, like but is that can by noticing and separating yourself from those thoughts with time, do you think that that's sort of the angle to go at with some of these environments that might feel like they're just more, your mind is more busy?
Well, I think yes, but I'm always very cautious about turning things into a practice. Like I'm just gonna go to this place and be really mindful. I'm like, oh God, the last thing you need is another job. You don't need that's just more noise in your
Or,
head.
yeah, totally.
So yes, on the one hand, it's true. Like for example, I think it's very helpful to have conversations about what is a good time, like when what's going on with insecurity, all that stuff. But I want to be very cautious to to not turn it into some kind of practice. But something occurs to me when you were talking, mate, which I think is key is, and this is universal, and I don't have a judgment on this, it's just kind of a description as to see, as for me and what I see for a lot of people is, if I'm in another way of saying there's a group of people who I feel really connected to and a group of people who I'm not sure what's going on here, sometimes I'm in my head about it, I don't have as much fun, is when we're with a group of people where we kind of align on a lot of things or where we kind of see the world in the same way, we just tend to have less judgment, right? So we tend to just be in that feeling of connection, and curiosity pops up more. But if you put, for example, if you dropped me into a group of, I don't know what I was trying to think of. I'm like, I don't know, like, into a world that I just do not know,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I might have a load of judgments pop up in my like, who are these people? Like, do they see the world like this? What's wrong with that? Like, it's not even my judgments, it's just stuff that pop. But
Yeah.
if I go that way, then I'm not surprised that I'm going to feel disconnected. Like if you say you drop me in with a bunch of I don't know, pro footballers, right? You put me on a I'm like, that is a world that I'm not in, and that is a world where like some of the ways that those people see the world, I'd probably be like, your priorities are totally upset, like are very different to mine, you know. Um, but if I wanted, this is just a general helpful thing for me, is in those moments, if I go the judgment way innocently, if I believe in those things or connect to those things, I think, oh my god, I don't have anything in common with these people, they're talking about this or they're drinking and I'm not, da 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 da, it
Yeah.
takes me one way. But if I'm leading with curiosity, like if I'm curious, if I'm kind of like, okay, we don't see the world in the same way, that's okay. Like I have, they're doing things that I might not do and they're kind of showing up in the world in a way that I might not show up. But it's okay. And like, you know, everyone, we're all doing what makes sense to me. Like, well, none of us were created in a vacuum. It's just, I'm curious how they see the world. Like, I remember my brother telling me a story. I don't think you'll mind me sharing this.
Oh,
For some reason, he was like, he did a lot of training in medical school because he's a physio in sports rehab and stuff. Tell me off for that. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm a movement expert. He's like, I'm more than that now. Um, but he was in a bunch of different kind of some of the communities were quite like I think judgy against each other. So like the dentists and the doctors and the physio, and there was all these different thoughts and feelings and stereotypes. And he said he went out for this dinner and he was sat next to this guy who was wearing a watch that cost like 40 grand or something, right? And
right.
his initial thing was, who's this who's this guy, like who does he think he is, who's this tosser or whatever sitting next to me? And then he sort of was like, no. And he was curious, and he sort of ended up having a really interesting conversation with this guy because he was like, why do you love that watch so much, man? Like I would never spend that on a watch. Like what is it you love about that? And he learned stuff about this guy, and yes, they see the world really differently, but he had an engaging conversation and it was connected and they learned from each other, right? And he suddenly realized that a lot of the judgments he had weren't. And I just share that as like in that scenario, had he gone towards judgment, division, and even conflict, maybe that we end up in one world. But if we're in kind of curiosity, open mindedness, and just exploring, we can end up in a different world. So sometimes it's about realizing, what am I carrying into these situations that's getting in the way? And I wonder what it would be like to lead with curiosity. And I gotta say, like I had a conversation with a guy where I am in Spain right now last year. I won't go into any details. Needless to say, he had some pretty strong opinions on some pretty hot topics, right? Things that I just don't agree with this guy about. But I got to say, like, we had a conversation for like 2 or 3 hours, and I learned a lot of stuff. I learned a lot. I realized, it's not black and white. I do see the world in this way. He clearly sees the world in the way that he does. And it was a really engaging and interesting conversation. And here I am talking about it a year later, so I remembered it, right?
Yeah.
So I just share that because I think generally as a universal, it's sometimes helpful to kind of reflect on that. Like how are we relating to
Yeah.
those groups and those worlds?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I love kind of maybe even wrapping up with that word curious because sober curious is such a beautiful
Yeah.
word too.
Yeah.
Just leading life with that lens of curiosity is always feels so different, feels so open and warm and like you can't get it wrong. And so yeah,
It's not high stakes. It's not high stakes to be like I know you I remember with my relationship with my dad did a complete 180 when I started. And it wasn't like a practice. I was like, now I'm going to be curious. I just had an insight. I realized, golly, you've basically been living your life as if it's your job to try and coach your dad to see the world like you do. And I suddenly realized he's never going to. For when he was born in 1951 and you were born in the late 80s, like that's not happening, And it suddenly just set me free from a load of stuff that had been in my head, and I suddenly wasn't threatened by the fact that he saw the world the way he does, and more we've been able to have conversations, and I've learned more from my dad, and it just doesn't. There's less conflict, so I think it's a wonderful. I think to compassion, curiosity, and just love. Like to me, that's central. It's just it's okay for us not to kind of agree with everybody about everything. We're
Yeah.
never going to.
Yeah, no, totally. And yeah, no, and I'm so grateful for your voice in this space. Thank you for, sharing all the things because when your dad made that comment about like, oh, well, you can share this, but don't share that. I had a very similar experience. My parents were like, I can't believe that you're telling all these people about your alcohol life on social
Yeah,
media. Like, this I hadn't, they're finding stuff out on social media maybe before I ever shared anything with them personally. So I think maybe that they kind of maybe took that personally too, which is understandable.
yeah, yeah,
But when we do that, it gives so much opportunity for people to connect and to see that they're not alone and to it's really valuable. And I think there's a lot in this world that we could do without with social media, but these platforms that we have to be able to share
yeah.
space and our stories and it just is such a gift that you're giving
Yeah.
to people. So
Oh, well, you too. And it doesn't have to be a podcast for anybody. It can just be finding that one friend and actually opening up and talking about stuff, right? But to
right,
me, it's just really, really valuable and helpful to whatever in whatever way makes sense to you to tell people on your terms in the way that makes sense, right?
that's
And
right.
yeah, it's very cathartic. It's kind of just healing to realize that you're not alone in this. Like there's a lot of people who are struggling with this stuff one way or another. Like
Yeah.
it's not uncommon at all.
No, all different kind of levels of relationships with these things and
Yeah,
and we can decide at any level of relationship that we want to change it
yeah,
or it will change it might change so but thank you Sam so very much we'll put in our notes all of the places that they can learn more
sweet.
about you and your substacks and your work with present and sobers.
Yeah, so one's put so the present and sober, and then rebel spirituality, and they're
Yeah,
both podcasts. So
yeah.
where did that hour go? Crazy.
I know. It
Yeah,
was so great. Thank you.
you're
I'm so
welcome.
excited to share you with my friends.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.